Thanks for joining the session, which I'm talking about lived experience in the workforce and also the role of the navigator. So this afternoon, we're going to start by talking about engaging or upskilling the wider workforce so they might be better placed to work with people with experience of disadvantage. My name is Joe Offord. I work for the Research and National Evaluators of the Fulfilling Lives programme. So I'm going to give a quick overview of our research in this area and then hand over to a couple of Fulfilling Lives partnerships to share some of their really good work they're doing in their local area, what they've learned through doing this. So if you have any questions about it, talk about here, pop them in the chat box, and it might be the case that one of the following speakers will hopefully pick it up later in the session. So to introduce this topic, I'm just going to start by talking a bit about the wider workforce. It's perhaps easiest to think about this as a visual or a diagram. So immediately around the client, you have support services that work directly with people with experience of multiple disadvantage, be that a sort of cross-service or a neutral key worker such as the Fulfilling Lives navigator, who we heard about this morning, or services that work with people with multiple disadvantage at the core of their job. So that's sort of the direct support workforce. And you'd probably put drug and alcohol workers in there, for example, as they'll be regularly seen in this group. Now we see the wider workforce, they're sitting outside of the core support, but interacting with those core support organisations. The difference is that for these staff roles in the wider workforce, working with the most complex clients is not the central part of their job. Their role is much wider. They might work with the general public or people with a lower level of need or less complex needs, but then at times be called upon to work with or support those with more complex and chaotic lives.
Joe, sorry to interrupt you. I know some people are struggling with sound. Can I ask that you turn your camera back just in case it helps improve it?
Yeah. Sure, yeah.
Yeah, that seems better now. Thank you. All
right, apologies. All right, so some examples of who might be in this wider workforce group include GPs, who will see complex patients, but also GP receptionists, who might be the first port of call for someone with experience of multiple disadvantage who needs to see a doctor. They might not be registered, they'll be screened by receptionists and ask questions they might not be prepared for. We've also got housing association staff. Now they might come into contact more often with people with experience of other needs too, but have really high caseloads, which might make it challenging to work in depth with their more complex clients. Again, it's not the core of their job. Emergency responders, so the police, paramedics, also the fire service, again will be called to incidents involving people with a variety of needs at that moment in time. We've got pharmacists, including those involved with supervised consumption, will have those of addiction and likely other overlapping issues coming in for scripts. And then we've got job centre staff here as well, who we know in some areas of the country are seeing more and more people, many of whom have other needs, some also have addictions, mental health needs, etc. One of the upcoming presentations is going to talk a bit more about working with DWP and job centre staff, as they've been a keen partner in some of this work. Of course, you can expand this wide workforce group. When you think about it, there's a whole host of industries and services that come into contact with people with experience of multiple disadvantage. Here, I've just got a few of them: taxi drivers, barbers, hospitality staff, the leisure industry, shops and supermarket workers. The list's endless, really. Some Fulfilling Lives partnerships have worked with people in some of these job roles in their local area, as they might be able to pick up on some issues during interactions with their clients or customers. And it'd be really helpful if they were confident to have conversations around this and maybe know how and where to signpost to specialist support. But we did keep it to a tighter group for this piece of the evaluation. We wanted to look at this group of services and others like them who it was felt might benefit from knowing a bit more about how to work with the most complex people they're likely to see and try to help during their day-to-day work. Also, just to say, it's not an exclusive list. These are just examples of the type of services that might fall under this category. Fulfilling Lives partnerships have been running for a number of years now. They've learned a lot about working with the most complex clients who have overlapping and long-term needs. And they feel like they could share some of this learning with services in the wider workforce who also work with this group, but just much less regularly. So I suppose the question is, why would the wider workforce be able to benefit from what fulfilling lives partnerships can offer staff in these type of roles? It's fair to say that if working with people with experience of multiple and complex needs is not a core part of your job, it's unlikely that you'll have received training in how to best do this. When you see tens of different people every day, all with different needs, of course, it's not expected that you'll be trained in how best to handle all the different types of people and needs that might present themselves on any given day. And without training or experience of working with more complex clients, staff might lack the confidence to have conversations around their needs, which can create anxiety for them and maybe an unwillingness to engage in those difficult conversations through fear of saying the wrong thing or maybe even making things worse for them. It's understandable. And not being familiar with trauma and how this can impact behaviour can affect how risk behaviours are interpreted and dealt with. Also, there is still stigma around homelessness, addiction or mental health needs or offending, and this can impact attitudes towards people with these needs. For example, some view addiction as a lifestyle choice if they don't fully understand what's behind this. And finally, working cultures, practices and procedures might make it difficult to provide the type of person-centred support that people with experience of multiple disadvantage need. Time spent with individuals during the working day can be limited and can be bound by other things such as sanctions, which might be seen as a priority. So fulfilling life partnerships have taken a variety of approaches to engage with the wider workforce and offer their expertise to upskill staff at all levels. Usually it is by designing and delivering training sessions or courses for staff and can be either fairly broad to cover multiple disadvantage or working with specific behaviours, groups or needs. And the latter can be designed to meet the needs of a particular client group or an area where it's felt that staff are particularly lacking experience of. You're going to hear about two of these in the next session, so I'm going to use the rest of my time just to give some thoughts on key lessons that have come out of this piece of research when thinking about how this type of work can be most effective. It might not be easy to start conversations around upskilling staff, but when those conversations do start and organisations are open to support, there seem to be some key lessons for making the most of this opportunity. Firstly, it really strengthens any work if a relationship can be built over a period of time. One-off training sessions can be great to give an introduction to a topic or an area, but to embed this practice, it needs to be a longer-term partnership. There isn't, a quick fix of just attending one training session. For example, collaborating can allow for a proper exploration of what the staff skill gaps are, what the best ways might be to deliver training over a period of time, deliver this training, gain feedback, and then build on this to ensure that any change is long-lasting. Also, genuine collaboration goes beyond having one individual committed to change driving this type of work. It needs a wider commitment, because if you don't have that, what if that one key individual leaves? Secondly, it's really important that staff at all levels are brought into any skills training or development. If something's aimed at client-facing staff, then this has to be sold to them in order for them to engage and get the most out of it, because something like this could easily be dismissed as a waste of time. But senior buy-in is also essential, not only to drive change and commitment and commit organisational time to this, but if frontline staff can see it's not something personal to them, but has the commitment of leaders and is an organisational-wide approach to sort of, a wider shift in culture and practice, it's more likely to be taken on board. Third, the voice of lived experience can really bring to life training sessions and show that with the right support, recovery is possible. Hearing reasons for disengagement or what drives certain types of behaviour, also the fears and anxieties that clients have when using different services and being asked to tell their story over and over again can really illuminate how important getting this right is. But also co-producing training and programmes of work with people with lived experience of multiple disadvantage can bring loads of other benefits too, such as helping to identify particular skills gaps, designing relevant content and giving their feedback too. Finally, for me, it's really important to consider how any changes or developments can be sustained and not just be temporary or tied to maybe that one particular individual who believes in it. The first point about collaboration over the longer term can help this, but also maybe can policies be adapted to protect these changes from slipping away? This might be embedding multiple disadvantage or psychologically informed training into staff induction or development processes. If changes can become formalised in policy, then they're more likely to continue in the longer term and help to contribute to a cultural shift too. That's all from me. Thanks for listening. I'm looking forward to hearing more from the rest of this afternoon's speakers.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jo. Just with the format of the sessions, we're not going to have questions just yet, so I'm going to go straight into the external speakers, and there'll be time for questions after them, and anything for Jo we can cover at the end of the session. So thank you ever so much, Jo. We're now going to hand over to Alan, who's the System Change Officer, and Rebecca, who is the System Change Lead with the Fulfilling Lives South East Partnership. And Alan and Rebecca are going to be co-presenting for this next session. So if you just bear with me for one moment, over to you, Alan and Rebecca. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Jo. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, I'm just going to kickstart us off. So if we could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So just before we get started, just wanted to throw this question out there to everybody on the webinar today. We often know that we want to bring about change in services and within teams and partners we work with, but sometimes it's just hard to know where to start. So any initial thoughts to where do you start when you want to encourage change in workforces? Anything that springs to mind, please do post it in the chat. And then we might try and circle back to that if we've got time towards the end of the presentation. So yeah, any thoughts you've got as to where do you actually get started with this sort of thing, share with the community in the chat there. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So Fulfilling Lives South East, who are we? I appreciate some of you may have heard from colleagues in other projects across England throughout the day, but just in case you haven't, Fulfilling Lives South East partnership has a real focus on multiple and complex needs or multiple disadvantage, and essentially that for us is for people experiencing at least 3 out of the 4 issues that you can see in the diagram here on the left of the slide. So either homelessness, substance misuse, mental ill health, current or historical offending. And often we are working and looking to develop services where people are having overlapping issues of all 4 of those things all at one time. And I'm sure for many of you who are joining the webinar today, this particular cohort as well is likely to be familiar to you, and there's often a lot going on. So this is the cohort and group that we have our project focused on. We are all about the end goal of affecting change, whether that be on an individual level with our service delivery teams who are working directly with clients to bring about change in their individual lives, or at a systems level, working with those support systems locally and nationally to try and bring about a shift whereby those services and systems can better work with this particular group of people. We have a real passion for co-production and putting the heart of people's lived experiences at the centre of our sort of interventions and the work we want to do. And for this particular Fulfilling Lives project, we work in Brighton and Hove and across East Sussex. So next slide, please. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Alan.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rebecca. I think, can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I think it's fair to say, like most good things that happen, there was a kind of coalescing of the stars, and a couple of things happened. The work we're doing, although it has branched out, and we can come on to that later to cover a wider geographical area, at the moment, the test bed for the work we're doing is Brighton Job Centre. And a couple of years ago, I don't think this was, certainly in surrounding job centres, this was happening, but I don't know about nationally. But Brighton Job Centre, we're establishing a complex needs working group. And they put out invites to all the relevant partners in the city, and they were inundated. So this group quickly bloomed and became a bit unwieldy and ran into the sand. But that did create an opening for us. And alongside that opening was conversations that were taking place and points that were getting raised at Fulfilling Lives action groups, which are lived experience, volunteer, service user-led groups within our projects, and much of the systems change work that we get involved with bubbles up from these groups. And through those points getting raised, we understood that this highlighted an opportunity for us to approach DWP colleagues. And I suppose in one way of thinking about it was the working group or the complex need group that got created had stopped, so there was no other partners, and it left an opening for us. And what we found was very receptive colleagues in the DWP to what our messaging was. And in that, we were able to, quite early on in our work with them, is to articulate what our longer term goal was and what we wanted to happen. And that was, we wanted their workforce to be more trauma informed and aware. And we were met with a like-minded view from the managers that we were speaking to. So we were off and running and on a really sure footing. I think it's just worth giving you a short overview of the kind of stepping stones, pieces of work we've done to get us to where we are now. Firstly, we collaboratively planned mystery shops and PI assessments with the Brighton Job Centre. So that would be PI assessments on the kind of physical environment. And on the back of that, we produced a short report with a set of recommendations. And a number of those recommendations were around workforce development and the building layout itself and the field. Subsequently of that, the DWP set up 2 working groups to take on these recommendations and implement them. But then we got locked down in March. So what happened there in terms of the impact of COVID? We sat back for 6 weeks to let DWP colleagues settle down and find their feet. And then we got in contact with them around about mid-May to kind of test the water and see what their appetite was like. And it became pretty clear from those first meetings. So everything from lockdown until now has been virtually. And it became pretty clear in those first meetings that they felt, as a result of COVID and lockdown, that the work we were doing was more important than ever. And there was clear momentum and strategic will and the enthusiasm for this work to continue. So that's what we did. We embarked on adapting and rewriting the kind of workforce development training program that we had developed to be available for an online audience. And that was 5 20-minute modules around trauma-informed practices and multiple complex needs customers, along with 3 workshops, which were each run 4 times. So it was quite a substantial training program that ran through all of September. Again, on the back of that, we produced a short report, set of recommendations, and within those recommendations, the 2 things we wanted to tackle first was embedding the training in their induction process and looking at their policy change around how a new policy would reflect the service's commitment to trauma-informed working, and for new staff to have the Fulfilling Lives training as mandatory as part of being a new recruit. We're currently in quite advanced talks around how we're going to combine the 3 workshops into 1 3-hour session that will be pre-recorded and placed on the, I think it's called the Civil Service Platform. It's the DWP kind of intranet they use for training. We're doing that very collaboratively with them because we want it to have relevance and longevity, so it's on there for a number of years. So going through that kind of stepping stone process with the DWP, as Joe alluded to, it's taken time. We have been talking to them and working with them really closely. I mean, I want to say kind of 2 years probably. And the impact of that has been, so the kind of obvious thing would be that it allowed us to stop, reflect, celebrate, pat each other on the back for a job well done. But most importantly, because the mystery shops and the PI assessments were quite a big undertaking, it allowed us to develop trust between one another. It illustrated to the DWP that we could deliver, and likewise, it illustrated to us that the DWP were serious about implementing change. And I will move slide, Beth, back to...
Great. So when Alan and I were reflecting on the work we've done with the DWP locally, we also appreciated that what might be helpful for you today is for us to share what we think enabled this long-term relationship to be as productive as it has been. So the next set of slides really outline our reflections on those key building blocks that have provided the environment for us to progress with this sort of work at a really sort of authentic and quite deep level. So hopefully this can provide some sort of maybe some transferable approaches and tactics for you guys locally in your areas to help bring about some positive changes in the workforces of partner agencies that you engage with. So the first one sort of enabling factor we wanted to share was really around that relationship building and how important it is to be very mindful and conscious of that when working with partners. It's not just about going there for a cup of tea, actually thinking quite tactfully about what you want to get out of that meeting, asking openly partners what they would want. We also were very proactive in all, making efforts to go to them and almost modelling what our client-facing workers do by assertively outreaching our partners. We were very open as well when we had questions that we didn't know the answer to. We were very open when we had any concerns about the work, or we felt if things were getting a bit stuck, we would say so. And I think by expressing some level of vulnerability, that helped really build some of those sort of authentic relationships and help nurture sort of the trust that Alan referenced. We also, as I'm sure many of you do, attend multi-agency meetings. And when we were in those spaces, we spoke about the partnership in a very warm way and named that we were looking to do work together. And I think that helped give our partners confidence that we were committed to working with them and that we were excited about it. So I think I want to hand back to Alan for the next sort of enabling factor.
Cheers, thank you. Let me just check I'm on the right slide. I am. I think what we had, and as the slide alludes to, is that we had support from a Fulfilling Lives core group member, and this is a group that sits pan-Sussex. It's a strategic group that sits across Brighton and Hove, Eastbourne and Hastings, and so it takes a kind of strategic overview of what the 3 local Fulfilling Lives projects are doing. And the contact we had via that group was a kind of senior manager within the DWP, and he was very much, he was a little bit ahead of the curve compared to some of his colleagues around thinking about complex needs. So that gave us an in. And when we got that in, the main driver from the Brighton Job Centre side of things was a partnership manager. I'm sure people on this webinar know the majority of jobs within job centres are quite inward looking to the business, whereas the partnership manager is out there building links with the community. So we were a perfect fit immediately with them. And I think to kind of cut a long story short, ultimately we were selling something that they wanted to buy. We were meeting, it was a meeting of minds at the right time, and we were bold. We laid our cards on the table and said, this is what we want to do, and this is what we can offer. And they were very, very receptive to that offer. And that allowed us to cultivate with DWP colleagues a sense of we're in it together. There's a shared responsibility here to make this happen. So that was in planning goals, evaluations, everything was conducted collaboratively, and that really allowed the partnership to and continues to really make it thrive. If you can move slide, Beth, and I'll hand back to.
Okay, the next sort of enabling factor we identified was around how we broke down the work into smaller chunks. So Alan touched on this about having that sort of stepping stones approach, and we find that a really useful way to keep our energy levels topped up and to enable those sort of break points where you can assess impact, celebrate success and effort, and also capture learning. So you've got this constant cycle of where you're able to have that moment to pause, redirect where you need to go next, but always with that longer term goal in mind. So we'd really recommend, if you've got a big goal with partners, breaking it down into smaller chunks to give yourself time to celebrate success, top up your energy levels, and bank your learning. And onto the next slide, please. And I'll hand back to Alan.
Cool, they're coming around quick. So I think in terms of, I was thinking about this, and I think there's a number of things we did do, which Rebecca and I have in some way touched upon already. But for me, the most important aspect of developing the partnership was placing Fulfilling Life's lived experience volunteers and employees in the room with DWP managers and staff. So as a project, we illustrated from the outset that volunteers and lived experience staff would be a foundational component of this work. So, for example, when we fed back on the mystery shopper exercise to managers, and it was pretty tricky feedback, it was delivered by lived experience volunteers, and the impact on the managers in the room that day was palpable, because the inference was if a role play and someone acting out a mystery shopper can be impacted in this way by that experience, the conclusion is then what is the impact on a real complex needs customer coming in to use our services, speaking to our staff. So I think that was the most important thing for me. It was, we made clear that we're not a project that pays lip service to being co-produced and doing things collaboratively. We were putting it front and center from the beginning. And that worked really, really well, because that is exactly what the DWP colleagues wanted. We were giving them access to customers, real customers who are accessing their services daily and weekly anyway, but otherwise they wouldn't be able to have those authentic conversations with them. So I think for me, that was the key aspect. And I will pass back to Rebecca for the final slide, I think.
Great, thanks, Alan. And then when we were looking back on the work we've done with the DWP for the last couple of years, we also noted how we had used specific tools that helped underpin the delivery of the work. So we would actively talk about change management techniques and what we might draw down from that sort of sphere of learning into the work, and how we might put things into practice to help us move the work along. We had a robust sort of project management and planning system in place, and an elaborate spreadsheet that was a very useful to-do list to keep us on top of things, especially when times got busy. And also we use something called a project definition framework. And if you do Google it, some of the frameworks come up, and we're happy to share more on that afterwards. But that just helped us really articulate what it was we were hoping to achieve in the long term. So I can remember a couple of years back, Alan and I sat down and we worked through this process to come up with the question that we were hoping to answer in partnership with the DWP, and that's provided that anchor point for us in all those short-term pieces of work. And then the fourth thing that we found was really useful was having evaluation mechanisms to support each of those short-term pieces of work, so we could demonstrate impact and measure and share and communicate then clearly what that impact has been. So I think that's our last slide, and we were then going to open up to questions, if there's time.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alan and Rebecca. That was great to hear about the work with the DWP. I know you'd asked you the question at the start of the session, and we had loads of interesting comments and discussions, so thank you to anyone that kind of engaged in that. I did kind of summarise some of the feedback, sorry if I've missed anything, but some of the key things that were mentioned there were around highlighting the benefits of change, collaborative approaches, been kind of open-minded and honest in the approach, and having that ability to listen and learn. And another thing mentioned around the importance of relationship building, which I think you touched upon in your presentation as well. So thank you for that. It's good to get the audience engaged early on. Does anyone have any questions for Alan and Rebecca? Please do indicate in the chat box, or feel free to unmute yourself now and ask them in person. May have escaped without any questions.
I think so. Our email addresses are there. If anyone wants to ask us questions after this event, that's fine too.
Brilliant, thank you. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Philippa, who is the final presenter in this first hour session. Philippa is the Practice Development Unit Coordinator based in Nottingham. Philippa, I'm just going to make you the presenter so you can go through your slides. So over to you, Philippa, thank you.
Thank you so much, Beth. And can I just do a quick check that everyone can hear me okay? Otherwise, I'll turn my video off.
I can hear you.
Perfect.
Yeah, I can too.
Brilliant. All right. So I'll get going. Hello everyone. My name is Philippa and I'm the coordinator for the Practice Development Unit. I will start by telling you a little bit about who we are. We're a partnership between Opportunity Nottingham, and they are the local Fulfilling Lives program operating in Nottingham, and the Nottingham Community and Voluntary Service. We work to promote collaborative learning and the sharing of good practice amongst anyone really who works with people who face multiple disadvantage. We follow the Fulfilling Lives definition of multiple disadvantage, expanded to include domestic abuse, particularly since the release of the Gender Matters report, and also acknowledging other sources of disadvantage that are related to, for instance, a person's ethnic background. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we came about, and it was very much about contributing to Opportunity Nottingham's core aim of achieving structural change at operational and strategic levels by working with strategic leaders and using the learning, outcomes, and impacts of the program to change the local system's DNA. So the PDU was intended as more than just a vehicle to disseminate the learning from the program in terms of good practice. Truly, the ambition was to create a platform that would connect the local system, creating more opportunities for cross-sector and multidisciplinary collaboration with the hopes of embedding the program's values and good practice within the mainstream services for the future. Sorry, this is Zoom and not moving forward. Here we go. And so we set up this independent unit looking at workforce development and cross-sector collaboration. The aims that we set ourselves to achieve were, first of all, to improve the skills and knowledge of professionals who work in the field of multiple disadvantage. And by this, we mean both specialist workers, but also the wider workforce who may come across clients who face multiple disadvantage. We intend to facilitate the sharing of expertise, good practice, and resources across sectors, with a particular focus on the voluntary and statutory agencies, though we've had enriching contributions as well from participation by academics and even some private sector agencies. We hope to promote and facilitate collaborative learning across the sectors, and in that way become a vehicle for breaking down barriers and support to increase cooperation and multidisciplinary work. We really want to create opportunities for promoting innovation and working practices across Nottingham, and we do this by continually seeking out learning from within and beyond the Opportunity Nottingham program, locally, nationally, and even internationally where appropriate. Ultimately, we hope that by contributing to change the system in these ways, we will lead to improved outcomes for those who face multiple disadvantage. So, how have we been working towards those aims? What is it that we exactly do? So we run a variety of learning events. They can be more one-off events like workshops and information sessions. We've on occasion also held a whole day, more conference-style types of events. And we also host a range of communities of practice who meet on a more ongoing basis. In addition to that, we also host an online hub where participants can find the calendar of our events. We host on there a range of good practice information and multimedia resources. We've recently launched an e-learning suite that sits on this online hub. And when subscribing to the hub, members can also subscribe to a monthly email newsletter. And that's the link to the website online. In terms of our learning offer, it is framed both for events and the resource hub around 5 core work streams, though we don't restrict ourselves to only these and also cover other topics and areas of good practice. But these are just really the key areas that we thought we would kind of raise focus on. So they are psychologically informed approaches, which includes trauma-informed practice and also strengths-based approaches, looking at service user involvement and co-production, housing first and homelessness, women's specific needs, and also substance misuse, including new psychoactive substances and alcohol. So that was just a brief overview of who we are and what we deliver through the PDU. But today we've been asked to talk a little bit more specifically around how we've been working towards engaging the wider workforce, and that is mainstream services who don't necessarily specialize in working with people who face multiple disadvantage. So I'm going to share a little bit about 5 key aspects about the PDU format and delivery that we've found to be quite effective in our engagement with these wider services. And I think a few of you have already, the previous presenters have already touched upon a few of these ideas as well. So the first of them is really our focus on collaborative learning. Our learning offer is not really formal training, but it's based around the acknowledgement that within the local workforce, there's already a wide range of knowledge and expertise to be shared. So we seek to offer a safe environment and a platform for services to share their best practice and support each other in the process. To achieve this, we mostly run cross-sector events that are open to services and organizations across the local system. We carefully promote our events and screen participants to ensure that we've got the widest variety possible of organizations attending, and we see this resulting in a richer learning experience for participants. We also embed this collaborative and inclusive approach in the way that we run the PDU, which is supported by a steering group attended by members of staff and volunteers from a variety of local organizations. And they input on what activities we pursue and also in evaluating our progress. This has shown to be a really good approach to ensure that our learning offer is appropriate and tailored, and also to reach audiences in a different way. We acknowledge that maintaining a diverse group is really key for this, but also a challenge. Our steering group is admittedly more heavy leaning towards the voluntary sector and housing services at the moment, but this is something that we try to keep top of mind and seek to address on an ongoing basis. We also actively engage with the voice of lived experience throughout both the planning and the delivery of our events, which are often attended by current or former service users who can share about their own experience firsthand. We welcome expert citizens from Opportunity Nottingham at our steering group and engage with them on a more individual basis as well to seek their inputs and their perspectives about the event topics that we choose and what aspects they would consider important for professionals to learn about and discuss. The Opportunity Nottingham Lived Experience team do a fantastic job of training and supporting them to participate in our events in a way that feels safe and meaningful for both the experts and the participants, and this shows. It's often one of the things that our event participants really feedback about after an event. This collaborative format and mode of operation means that our events are not only a useful learning experience, but they're also a really good platform for networking and building relationships with other services. Our event participants often arrive early and stick around afterwards to discuss ideas, exchange contact details, and carry on conversations. This is something that was almost seamless when we were running face-to-face events, and we're still working on recreating this on some level for our virtual delivery. Another thing that we feel like has worked quite well is also the different formats that we offer for our learning events. Ad hoc events like presentations or workshops seem to work really well for awareness raising and reaching a really wide number of people. And our communities of practice, which we've often set up in the sequence of feedback from an ad hoc event, delves deeper into the detail and enables smaller groups of people to work together in developing and implementing changes to their practice. And key things that our community of practice participants highlight about them is the opportunities that they create to connect with agencies that they wouldn't normally be able to work with, the feeling of being in a safe space where they can talk through difficult issues without judgment, and also the skill and support of the facilitators that guide their meetings and their discussions. And finally, the other element that I wanted to talk about is that we also seek to reach our audiences in ways that really work for them, adopting a very responsive approach. We do this first by acknowledging that attending events isn't always easy, particularly face-to-face. So we make sure that our learning offer is available through different formats and different channels. This includes our online resource hub, where you can access digital good practice tools and information. Since moving to a virtual event arena, we offer recordings from our learning events that participants can watch in their own time. And we've also recently launched an e-learning suite that covers core themes around psychologically informed environments and trauma-informed care, as well as an introduction to multiple disadvantage. Part of our responsive approach is also striving to be led by our participants. We do this by continually inquiring about and responding to their areas of need and interest in terms of professional development. but also through encouraging them to contribute to our events with their own knowledge and expertise. We do this partly via our steering group, but also through direct engagement with current participants, ad hoc invitations, and general communications through email and social media. So, how have we actually been doing in terms of this engagement locally in Nottingham? So this is just to give you a bit of an idea of who we've been reaching. By the end of November, we have been able to engage with a total of 1,339 individuals, out of which 919 have attended at least one of our events, and 758 are members of our online resource hub. The majority of our participants is local to Nottingham City and County, as this is our target audience, but we have growing engagement with professionals and volunteers from across the country, really, and we always welcome the rich exchanges and contributions that this non-local participation creates. The majority of our audience is also from the voluntary sector, just over 50%, but that split has changed over time through a lot of engagement work that we've done over the years with the statutory agencies in particular, and you can see them in that word cloud on the slide. So these include local authorities, the DWP, probation, and the police. So it's really a work in progress. So in terms of our impact, and this data relates to our last financial year, so this was April 2019 to March 2020, and this is what participants at our events had to share in terms of feedback. So just a few snippets. 79% of them reported that they felt participating in a PDU event improved their awareness of understanding of the topic. Also, 79% reported that they intended to make changes to their working practices as a result of what they'd learned. And finally, almost all participants reported that they intended to share what they had learned with people that they work with. And it's been really interesting to see the feedback coming to this particular question, because more and more we see people feeding back that they'd like to share with people from outside their own organizations, which to us hints at those ideas of collaboration and cross-sector working being more and more embedded locally. So in this next slide, I just wanted to collect a few snippets of what our participants had to say about our learning events. And I don't know if you can see my mouse when I'm hovering over them, but I'll start by talking about our communities of practice. So starting with that, participants have really highlighted aspects like the opportunity to meet other services and make connections. Other participants in our COPs also feel like these are safe spaces where they can talk through complex questions. Then down over here, other event participants have highlighted how they now feel better equipped to work in a more person-centered way. Also, things that are called out are the impact of listening to lived experience and how this can change your perspective. And this particular comment was made about a video from Opportunity Nottingham that shares the story of Trevor, who's a former beneficiary from Opportunity Nottingham. And finally, I just had to include this comment at the top, just talking about the inspiring element, really, of seeing the commitment of other professionals to make meaningful change. And so I think the next slide is the final slide around lessons learned. And while I was preparing this presentation and thinking about this, it really kind of struck me that some of the core learning that we try to engage our audience with really applies in this setting as well. And I'm thinking particularly about some of the lessons of being more psychologically informed. So I've got 5 kind of lessons to share with you today. The first of them being that relationships are key, and I think we've heard that a lot today. We feel that the collaborative aspect of our learning offer and environment is clearly one of the aspects that participants seem to respond the most to. Time and time again, they feedback about how much they've gained from meeting other people and forging new professional relationships and connections, and how that enables them to provide better support for their service users. The second lesson is that everyone has something to share. So a key element of our approach is that everyone can benefit from participating in the PDU, and everyone has expertise to contribute to it. So while focusing on being a platform where local voices can be heard and providing the space and the opportunity for them to contribute as much as they benefit is really a powerful way of engaging with people. Our third lesson is to embrace and respond to the diversity of your audience. So we feel like it's really important to understand and respond to the differences of those who you're trying to engage. So adopting a person-centered approach will help you to provide a learning offer that works for people and will keep them engaged on an ongoing basis. The fourth lesson kind of continues on the same theme. So it's really just give people what they want. Just as it is good practice for you to speak to your service users, for example, to understand what changes they want to make or are ready to make, you should really speak to your audience to understand what they're looking for in terms of their learning and how they're interested in engaging with what you have to offer. And finally, just to reiterate the message that we really shouldn't underestimate the importance and value of lived experience. So we can't equip the wider workforce with tools on multiple disadvantage if we're not meaningfully including the voices and perspectives of those who actually face it. So we think it's absolutely key to listen to their experiences of using services, what challenges they face, and their unique insights into what works and doesn't work for them. And I believe that is all that I had to share with you today. It is indeed. So these are just my contact details. I'm happy to answer any questions now if there's time for it, but also feel free to be in touch out of the setting if you'd like to. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the purpose of solution to enlist us and engage in the wider workforce. We've got a few comments. People very impressed by the reach of the PDU and impressed about the impact. And Rachel, who's attended an event pre-lockdown, was really impressed with kind of the energy and the quality of those discussions. So that's a great thing to say about PDU. We have a question from Rebecca, who's asking, how long has the PDU been active?
Right, so just a little over 3 years in total. The PDU started around October, November 2017, and I'm actually the second coordinator, so I haven't been here for the whole journey, but I've been here for about a year and a half.
Nice, thank you. We do have a few more minutes for questions, so if you've got anything for any of our speakers, please do unmute your microphones or pop them in the chat box now. We've got a quiet audience this afternoon. Alison has asked, are the trainings free to participants?
Yes, so while Opportunity Nottingham is running, we're currently fully funded by Opportunity Nottingham and by the lottery that way. So whilst the Opportunity Nottingham as a program is still running, all of our training and all of our online resources are completely free to use for participants.
Brilliant, thank you. And yeah, pop the link as well for the PDU in the chat box. So please do click it now and sign up. You register your interest there. Please. Are the plans to continue post the National Lottery funding?
Definitely. So it's what we're focusing on for the next kind of couple of years. Opportunity Nottingham finishes in summer 2022. So we're currently doing a lot of backstage work in terms of understanding how we can keep this going. The interest is there. We've heard this from a lot of our participants that they'd be keen to carry this on. Also, there's a lot of support from the Opportunity Nottingham board in that direction as well. So we're trying to work out what that will look like and how we'll be able to fund this.
Awesome. Well, fingers crossed it can continue. Rebecca and Alan, if you're still on the call, which I think you are, we have a question that's come in from you. So we've been asked by Dee, did you face any barriers with the national DWP structures when trying to change locally? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Great. Good question. I suppose one of the things that was a challenge is that when the national policy direction changes, then our partners may not have the time maybe they once had to dedicate to multiple disadvantage. So an example of that more recently is that as a result of COVID and the economic forecasts, the DWP has been asked to look at have a focus on young people and getting young adults into employment. So there's a big push in that area, whereas this time last year there was a multiple disadvantage strategy being rolled out locally that we could tap right into and connect so well with. So what we've done is we've had an open conversation with the managers at our local Brighton Job Centre and across Sussex about that, and just said, well, how best can we work continue our work together. We both understand we want to do that. And we've been able, and our DWP partners were able to identify a couple of policies, national policies, particularly around the compassion policy, that would enable them to have a message back to their seniors that this work still connected in with a national agenda. So yeah, we did have to do a little bit of thinking creatively with the managers, but I hope that helps answer the question.
Thanks, Rebecca. And a final question for you, Philippa. Do you hear about whether anyone who has attended the sessions has changed their practice as a result? So thinking about how to instigate longer lasting change from this type of training.
Yeah, so anecdotally, yes, in conversations, but we haven't done a kind of a thorough overall evaluation of actual impact. So there was about, I think, a year and a half in, we did do an external evaluation that was looking at impact of the PDU in that first period. And there were already some hints at actual change happening. We're hoping to kind of do a new cycle of evaluation now that enough time has elapsed again to gather some more meaty insights about that. So for now, everything that we've collected is more focused on intention. Hopefully we will have some actual data to share and hopefully some insights around how that's worked, what that's looked like within those particular services, and any lessons that we can share really to carry this momentum.
Brilliant. Thanks, Philippa. And yeah, please do keep us updated if you're able to do any further evaluative work. So looking at the time, we're now just going to take a short break so people can go and grab a drink or whatever. And we're going to resume at 3:05 for the final session of today. So I will see you all in just under 10 minutes. Thank you. Paul, if you are on the call and can hear me, can I just do a quick sound check with you before the final session?